topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, Houston. Welcome to another Ask the Experts, where we bring you the top experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about estate planning. And we have our expert has been with us for over 2 years now. And we get so many people writing us in telling us how much they love the show. It's called the Dean Law Firm. The Dean Law Firm here in Houston. They do estate planning, they do elder law, they do wills and trust. And like I said, we've had so many complimentary messages, communications of people who love this show. And we've got another great one for you today. We have one of Julia Dean's associates with us today. He's been with us before, so this is going to be easy for him. Attorney William Harlow. Good afternoon, William.
Hello, how are you doing today, Steve?
We're doing great. Hey, you're like a veteran now with this.
Yeah, it's 2 or 3 times, I think. I don't recall exactly, but
yeah,
starting to get the hang of it.
Tell us as much as you know about the law firm and about your background.
Okay. So I'll start with my background a little bit as far as my legal background. So I went to law school out in San Diego, California. I practiced law in Fresno, California for a number of years before moving to Texas earlier this year. So my Texas license could be any day now, should be here in the next couple days, finalized. Now, as far as Dean Law Firm, this law firm has been around for, I think, 15 years or so at this point, specializing in estate planning, elder law, tax planning, for estate taxes, things like that. So we're always happy to help people with probate matters, estate planning matters, and other issues.
William, tell people why it's so important, estate planning.
Yes, sir. So I think it's important to have your affairs in order because things may not go the way that you think they would go. We've seen it time and time again with probates, particularly ones where there's no will involved, which we call intestate probates. Or sometimes maybe the title of the house isn't quite what we think, how we think it's held between a married couple, for instance, right? Maybe it's just in one spouse's name, or maybe one spouse passed away and we never administered that first spouse's estate, and we have to go back and do some administration, right? So it's good to stay on top of it so that you kind of know what's going to happen when you pass away, right? It's just as much for your kids as it is for you, right? Or whoever's going to be in charge of distributing your estate. So it's good to kind of stay ahead of the ball and make sure everything is as easy and the administration is the least burdensome it can possibly be.
William, we never know, do we?
We do not. We do not.
And I got to tell you, I don't know why I've noticed it so much in the last year, but I have seen more people pass away. And I'm talking about athletes, celebrities, people in their 30s, 40s. Um, they usually just say it was a heart attack or something or
Sure,
cancer.
sure.
You just don't know when your final day is.
That's true. That's true. I've seen, you can go online and look at, 10 famous people who have died without an estate plan, right? You usually find like people like Prince, or I'm pretty sure, what's his name? Steve McNair used to play for the Titans.
Yes,
He didn't have any, yeah, right. So, just a couple people, right? And when you're dealing with estates of that magnitude, then there's a lot of potential for infighting among family members, and different, litigation, right? And this is all going to drain the resources of the estate. Um, so the beneficiaries, are going to feel the pain of that, right? They're not going to get as much if they're paying legal fees and litigation costs.
right.
So the fees associated with setting up an estate plan can also prevent other legal fees and administrative costs later on that would be much greater.
Especially probate.
Yes, sir. Especially probate and then any litigation, right? So probate is expensive. That's the court overseen process of distributing someone's estate. So if you have no will, or if you have a will, right, a judge has to kind of oversee the disposition of your estate, make sure all your creditors are paid. Now, before your beneficiaries can take from your estate. Now, if you have no will, right, and we haven't set the plan up, and let's say maybe you have a blended family or kids that don't agree on the disposition of certain assets, um, there's potential for conflict that could have been easily avoided by planning it out ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, what's always has amazed me, I think we spoke about this on the last show, was Prince. I mean, with all of his money,
Right.
and he did not even have a will,
That's
a
right.
simple
Right.
will.
That's yeah. I mean, it's really surprising to me. You'll see kind of celebrities and very wealthy people that have abundance of resources that never got around to setting up their, even at the most simple level of setting up their estate, um, for ease of administration. And now I believe, I'm not entirely sure about this, but the Prince estate may be somewhat contentious, right? I can only imagine, when there's that much
Yes.
money on the line, people probably coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. And I heard that, and this is well beyond your time, but I heard that Larry King, the big talk show host, had his will written on a napkin. Does that
Ah,
hold up in court?
so we usually refer to those handwritten wills as holographs. So it's a holographic will, and there are certain requirements that can be met for those. Each state's a little bit different, but I think at common law, the most common way is the whole thing has to be written in the testator's handwriting. It has to be signed by the testator. Now, the different states may add different requirements to that, but those can hold up. I think I saw something. It was in the Aretha Franklin estate. That's kind of going on right now. There was a holographic will that came into play that entitled, I believe it was her children to some real estate, which is, it's always interesting. People find these things in the different places, and they actually have a legal binding effect. So, but again, we don't typically want to rely on something like that. We want
Yes.
to kind of have a really well thought out plan, and make sure that everything's going to hold the weight that we think it's going to hold.
Well, I have got to bring this up because I hope that no one else makes the same mistake. A friend of our family's, in order to save money, did one of those uh, online wills.
Sure, sure.
And, when you do an online will, first of all, it's hard for an attorney to explain it because their time is valuable. But he passed away, and it turned out the will had a lot of problems with it.
Sure.
Here he thought he was saving money, William,
Right.
and turned out really costing him a lot. You got a great law firm in Houston, like the Dean Law Firm, and
Sure.
I'm telling you, it is worth the money.
Right. And I've seen from time to time, people will come in with those form wills or something they found online, right? And they'll say, okay, well, here's the will, I need it to be administered. Or even trust, right? Sometimes there's form trust that you can do. And a lot of these companies are kind of national level companies, but when you're dealing with something like this, state to state has different execution requirements. So, for instance, for a will, now I'm licensed in California. To do a validly executed will there, you have two witnesses witness the testator's signature, right? Whereas in Texas, they have two witnesses and a notary for the self-proving affidavit. So there's a little bit of extra, one extra little requirement there. Now, when you get these kind of one-size-fits-all forms, you may run into problems of validity, right? Sometimes people come in and they're like, "Oh, I had my will notarized," and we look at it and we're like, "Well, the statute says you have to have two witnesses, so this is not a valid will." Or maybe they come in and they found a form online, right? They filled their name in and signed it. And I actually had this happen once. He comes in and he's like, "Hey, here's my will. What do you think?" And I say, well, I know you don't have any kids, but this here says that your kids were going to get your estate. So, is that true? Like, what is this going to actually do? So, we tend to prefer to make all the estate plans, the wills and the trusts, really tailored to the person's individual needs or the family's needs. We don't want to just kind of do what's your name, what's your birth date, sign here type of deal, right? We want to make it really kind of what people need.
I agree. Talk about between a will and trust.
Sure. So at kind of a really basic level, both of them are testamentary instruments. The trust is going to be able to do a little bit more. But one of the key components or key aspects of the trust is that it avoids probate. So I talked about earlier how if you have a will or you don't have a will, right, you go to this court overseen process called probate, in which an administrator or an executor is appointed to distribute your estates, right, or your estate to your beneficiaries and to pay your creditors and square away your estate. Now, if you do a trust, a lot of that same stuff's going to happen, but there's no court involvement. It can all happen privately. A lot of the times the administration can go a lot quicker because you're not dealing with court calendar and judicial approval. You are kind of either doing it just out of a law office or, some people attempt to do it themselves. I don't really recommend that, but it can go a lot smoother when you're not dealing with courts and things like that. Now, another aspect of the trust is that it also, if it's funded properly, can provide what we call disability protection during lifetime. So you can arrange for someone to take over your finances if you ever become disabled mentally, right? So like you get dementia or you're in a coma or something like that, right? You can kind of tee it up to where, oh, my spouse or maybe my son or whatever it is going to be ready to step into my shoes financially and pay all my bills and manage my finances during the incapacity, right? And then when you pass away, it just transitions into that distribution phase. So it does both really well if it's funded and maintained properly.
And what about, you hear so much about these living trusts.
Right.
So I heard those are really good.
Right. So that's kind of what I was just talking about. There's many different names for this, right? You call it a revocable trust, revocable living
Yes, that's
trust,
one I've
living
heard.
trust, right?
Revocable.
So there's it all refers to the same kind of thing. We're talking about a trust that's not necessarily a separate entity from you. It still uses your social security number, for instance, for your bank accounts. It's just a different way to hold title, right? So your deed would read, trustee of the trust, right? Your bank account would say trustee of the living trust, whatever the name may be. And what that does is it gives whoever the trustee is authority to deal with those particular accounts or real estate or whatever the asset is. So those are the most popular. Usually, we refer to those as kind of the foundation of the estate plan. So even if you're going to do additional planning, we always start with the revocable trust or living
What
trust.
about how important is it the power of attorney?
Right. So power of attorney is important, and when we do any estate plan here, whether it be a will-based estate plan or a trust-based estate plan, it comes with a package of documents, right? One of those documents is the power of attorney. So even if you have a trust, or if you have a will, that's going to be what. So let me take a step back. If you have a will, that's going to be what your agent is going to take care of you during your lifetime. Whereas if you have a trust, it's going to be trustee and agent, right? Oftentimes they're the same person. They just have two different capacities they can work in.
Gotcha.
Now, the agent's going to be able to do a few things the trustee doesn't necessarily have authority to do. So we talk about moving things into your trust. Your agent can do that. We talk about dealing with Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, VA benefits, things like that. Typically, the power of attorney is the one that does that, or the agent under the power of attorney. And then dealing with the courts, right? If you have to go to court or something like that, your agent is the one that would do that for you. So the power of attorney is an important piece. No matter what kind of estate plan you do, it's always included in there because it still does serve a role. Although with the trust, it may be like a more diminished role, but it's still important.
When somebody passes away, William, how long normally does it take to sit down with the family and go over the will with them?
Sure. So it's going to really depend, right? If it's a will that we prepared in our office, right, and we're familiar with it and we work with the family, right, it doesn't, and we already have a copy of it, right, and we've had a chance to review it, not necessarily that long. So if someone comes in, right, we usually ask for documents ahead of time so we have a chance to look at them before we meet with the people. It doesn't really take all that long to review. When you're dealing with a will and you're dealing with court, the administration is really kind of what takes the longest. So, applying to open a probate, right, to prove the will, to get letters testamentary, then you have to do publication, right, in the local newspaper for any creditors. So there's a lot of requirements you have to satisfy. That takes time, and there's expense to it as well. So when someone comes in the office, it doesn't necessarily take all that long.
Is it tougher when somebody has passed away that had no health issues? It just came on all of a sudden. Is that a tougher meeting?
What was that last part?
When somebody suddenly passes away.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That seems like that's got to be a tough meeting.
Yeah, that it is true, especially when it's not like a natural cause or something. There's like a car wreck or something like that. We've had several of those. Pretty young people. Car accident, and thankfully they had all their affairs in order. Or maybe someone that's a client already, their kid passes away, and they come in and they're like, well, we have to amend our plan a little bit because this child is deceased. So it is hard, and it's not, death in general is hard. But whenever it is something you weren't expecting, right?
Right.
Then it's a little more difficult. Whereas, we've done plans before where people, let's say they get like some sort of terminal diagnosis, and then they call us and they're like, "Hey, we need to do this. We need to finally get around to doing this." And we can turn it around pretty quickly if that's the case. But yeah, it's never really that pleasant. Let's put it that way.
Well, believe it or not, this is the fastest 25 minutes in radio and TV. You did such a great job today. It went by really fast.
Yes, sir.
First of all, let's give everybody the phone number.
Sure. So our office number is 281-277-3326. And that's Dean Law Firm.
And the website is www.juliadeanlaw.com. That's juliadeanlaw.com.
That's right.
You've got a great website, and give them a call. Don't do this online. I'm telling you, I know for a fact.
We don't want to have another case study, right? Don't be an example.
I'm sure the Julia Law Firm's with us twice a month. I'm sure William will be back with us again. William, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We're glad you're in Houston and that you're with the Dean Law Firm now.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you too.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
We'll see you soon. That was attorney William Harlow of the Julia Dean Law Firm. That's it for us today. We will be back with you again next week with more Ask the Experts. Thank you so much, Juan, our producer, and we'll see you soon. Everybody have a great weekend.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.